Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias for the translators. They have been very good to us English speakers today. Muchas gracias. And I hope that you will be able to understand me through the translator. For those of you who are trying to listen to me in English, I sometimes get very excited about my topic. And because of that, I might talk very fast. But if I talk too fast, my wife is here, and she will wave her arms. She is perfectly okay. She's just telling me to slow down. Next. Next. Attention. Yeah, good. Okay, my theme has been for many years that renewable energy has come of age as a commercial generating technology. It is no longer an alternative source of energy. Wind energy in particular has been growing at an exponential rate for almost 25 years. Most of that growth has taken place here in Europe, but now the growth is spreading to the rest of the world. Today, there's about 30,000 megawatts in North America, most in the United States, and some 70,000 megawatts here in Europe, most of that in Germany and Spain, and another 30,000 megawatts in Asia, most of that's in China and India. And it's growing at an exponential rate because wind energy does work today. And it works today because we know what works and what does not work. We have learned over the 30 years what kinds of technology do not work. Fortunately for Spain, you have not wasted any of your money on these other technologies. You are using wind turbines that work. Next. So why now? Why is wind energy being used? As I said, it's because it does work today. Wind turbines today are far more reliable than they were in 1981 when you installed the first wind turbines here in Catalonia. Yep, okay. Wind turbines are far more productive today because they are much, much bigger. And as they've gotten bigger, we've gained economies of scale. So as we've made the wind turbines more productive, we've gained economies of scale. The costs have declined, so wind turbines are far more cost effective. Next. Wind capacity is growing mostly in Northern Europe and in Asia. It has begun to again grow in North America. But we North Americans, particularly we Americans, have a very difficult problem with planning for the future. Sometimes in the United States, we will install 8,000 megawatts. And then the next year, we may not install any. We can't make up our mind whether to go forward or to stop. Maybe it's something like Catalonia. But North America today is facing an energy crisis, but few people in North America realize that. And because they have not realized that, we have simply been dabbling around the edges of renewable energy policy. There are a number of serious issues confronting us in North America. Climate change is only one issue. Another issue is liquid fuels for transportation, because in North America we have very little public transit, very few trains, very few streetcars. Almost all of us must drive our cars, and we are dependent on liquid fuels. And these domestic supplies of liquid fuels are declining. Next. Another major problem confronting North America is the decline of natural gas. Most North Americans do not realize that both natural gas in Canada and in the United States has passed its peak and has begun to decline. And many people in North America need natural gas to heat their homes, particularly in Canada. And since about 3 years, former Vice President Al Gore has changed the public dynamics in the United States by suggesting that we should go to 100% clean energy. This has changed the discussion in the United States. Next. So renewable energy for us in North America is not only an opportunity for us to meet the challenges of climate change, liquid fuels, the decline of natural gas, but gives us an opportunity to reindustrialize the heartland of North America where there are so many people out of work. And we are looking to Spain and Germany as an example of how many jobs have been created, and we want to build wind turbines again in North America. Next. So the growth of renewable energy, the growth of wind energy in the United States in the last few years has been tremendously exciting, and that's very good. However, the rate of growth is nowhere significant enough. Next. In the United States, we consume 4,000 terawatt hours of electricity, 4,000 billion kilowatt hours of electricity per year, and 80% of that comes from fossil fuels. Next. So if we were to convert the 80% of electricity in the United States that comes from fossil fuels to clean renewable energy, it would require us to install 2,500,000 megawatts of wind turbines in the United States. That's 120 times what we have today. Next. And why this is so important is that because in North America, we consume more electricity per capita than almost anyone else in the world. And Canada is even worse than we are in the United States. And why that becomes important, because if some people do not like wind turbines on the landscape, if you cut your electricity consumption in half, you only need half as many wind turbines. And so it's very important to compare, for example, Germany, how much of a wind turbine is required to offset the consumption of a home in Germany versus that in Texas. It takes a lot of wind turbines to meet the electrical needs of Texas versus Germany. Next. So currently there's about 25,000 megawatts of wind turbines in the United States, 2,400 megawatts in Canada, and only 100 megawatts in Mexico. Next. In the United States, Texas, yes, can you imagine this? Texas of George Bush, Texas of cowboys and oil wells, has more wind energy than any other state or province in North America, followed by the farm state of Iowa. Next. And in Canada, Ontario, the province of Ontario, that's where Toronto is the capital city of the province of Ontario. It has more wind energy than any other province in Canada. Unfortunately, it only has about 1,000 megawatts. Next. And what you can see from this illustration is that the market in North America, in Canada and the United States fluctuates wildly, as I said. One year it could be 8,000 megawatts. Next year we don't know how many it will be. For example, in the United States, we do not know this year how many megawatts will be installed. Next. But we have made a lot of progress in the United States with wind energy. And I like to point out to people who say wind energy, as they have said here in Catalonia 20 years ago, will never amount to anything. I can say already today in Minnesota, 7.5% of the electricity in Minnesota comes from wind energy. And in Iowa, over 7% of the electricity comes from wind energy. Next. So why have the Europeans been so successful at developing wind energy, and what can we learn from the lessons here in Europe? First, they've engaged the community. They've enabled the communities to become involved in the development of renewable energy. They've been able to participate in the renewable energy revolution you have heard about today. And they have been able to do that because of a system of feed-in tariffs that I call advanced renewable tariffs. Next. Next. Okay. And why that's important, and you've heard that just recently here today, it's critically important that the public accept the use of wind energy in the landscape, because unlike nuclear power, you cannot have a strong government or a dictator say, we will build the power plant there, people, you have to get out of the way. Wind energy requires that we put lots of wind turbines across the landscape, and because of that, the people have to accept wind energy, or we will never have as much wind energy as we need to meet our renewable energy future. But as we become more successful with renewable energy, with wind energy, the opposition becomes more intense. The opposition grows because the coal, nuclear, and natural gas industry begin to worry that their markets will begin to decrease. Next. So there's several ways of developing wind energy. Spain only has one way of developing wind energy. That's wind farms owned by giant corporations. Another way to develop wind energy is like we see some places in the United States where a homeowner may install a wind turbine in their backyard. But there's a third way to develop wind energy, as we've seen in Denmark and Germany, and that's locally owned small groups of commercial scale wind turbines, large wind turbines next. And why that's important, because as Dutch farmers often say, your own pigs don't stink. And if you own a share in a wind turbine, it's more likely that you will accept the wind turbine in your midst. You may not love the wind turbine, you may not think the wind turbine is beautiful, but if you get a check every month, you say it is okay. Next. So we need to build acceptance of wind energy in particular. We must share the opportunity in the renewable energy revolution to all the people of Catalonia, all the people of Spain, all the people of Europe and the world beyond. The public must participate for the renewable energy revolution to be successful. Next. So what is this idea of community power? It's responsible to the community where the wind turbines are located. It can be many different forms. It can be a cooperative. It can be Aboriginal people in North America, that is what we would call Indians, First Nations, or Native Americans can own these, farmers, of course, homeowners, but it requires the use of commercial scale wind turbines, big wind turbines, not little ones. Next. So if we want to use community power, we can increase the acceptance on the landscape. It is not a panacea. There is no technique, no panacea for making everyone accept wind energy. But one of the ways that we can help increase acceptance is by giving people an opportunity to own part of the wind turbine. And by doing so, we can engage more people in the community. They learn more about how to save energy, how to use energy wisely, and of course, why wind energy makes sense. And we can generate more income, more money to put in people's pockets so that they can have more money to spend on other things. And we can create more jobs locally, and you've been very successful in Spain, and you were successful here in Catalonia in creating jobs through ecotechnia. Next. And the best example, of course, is Denmark, where we have the Danish cooperatives. 1/4 of the capacity of all the wind energy in Denmark is owned by cooperatives, and most of the remainder is owned by farmers. So 5% of the Danish population owns a share of wind turbines. And what percentage of the Spanish population owns a share of a wind turbine here? 0. Null. Next. And these projects do not have to be small. They can be fairly large. And a good example is the project at Middelgrunden off the capital of Denmark in Copenhagen, just outside the capital of Copenhagen. It's a 40 megawatt project. It was developed by the cooperative. Half of the project is now owned by the cooperative. The half other is owned by the municipal utility. And as you heard today, there's about 9,000 people who have invested in this project. And so this would be a project like you would see offshore Barcelona. It would be visible from the people of Barcelona. This wind farm is visible from the Parliament building of Denmark, so that when Danish politicians talk about wind energy, they can look out the window and actually see it working. Next. And why I single out Spain? Because Spain represents, like the United States, countries that only have one way of developing wind energy: giant wind farms owned by giant corporations. In contrast, in the Netherlands and in Germany and in Denmark, a large percentage of the wind turbines are owned by the people. And in the case of Denmark, it's almost 90% of the wind energy is owned by the people. And in Germany, it's about 50%. So let's take an example. So Germany has 24,000 megawatts. Half of that is 12,000 megawatts. That's the amount that's owned by the people of Germany. And that's equivalent to the investment of $25 billion. It's an enormous amount of money, and that's been invested by people like yourselves. Yet Spain is 0. And that's what I hope that you can change. Next. So our problem in the United States is much like it is here in Spain. We have been left behind by the development of community power, but I think we're trying to catch up. It's not easy for us to do it in the United States and Canada, just as it's not easy for you to do it here. But we're just at the beginning, and there's great prospects for change, great prospects for the future of community wind power in North America, in the states of Minnesota and Ontario. Next. So it is not a niche market. That is, it's not a small market. It could be a huge market, but right now it's very, very small. It's so small, no one even knows we exist in North America. But it can become very big, as shown by Germany. And we now have some serious companies who are interested in this. John Deere, which makes farm machinery, now finances, that is, they give money for the development of community-owned wind projects. Next. And what's important about community wind power is not just that farmers make money or that you make money, is that it creates opportunity for all people. Everyone can participate. Everyone has the opportunity to participate. You can choose whether you want to put your money in a windmill or in a solar panel, but you have the opportunity to do that. You in Catalonia today, you in Spain today do not have a choice. Next. So if you're a farmer, or let's say a vineyard here in Catalonia, what do you need to make this happen? First of all, you need higher prices where it's less windy, because where you live, you're given the wind that you have. If you're a farmer or a homeowner or a community, like Barcelona, you cannot move Barcelona to where it's windier. So you need to be able to use wind energy where you live or where you work. So you have to have higher prices where you live. You have to be able to connect to the grid, and they have to buy your electricity. And of course, here in Catalonia, you need to have quicker permitting, quicker acceptance of the wind turbines to be installed. We have exactly the same problem in Ontario. In Ontario, Canada, and Ontario's government is now considering a law that will make it easier to install wind turbines. Next. So here's an example that I use for farmers in North America. Let's take a typical 2-megawatt wind turbine. It'll cost about $4 million, and it'll produce less than 4 million kilowatt hours in, let's say, Ontario, Canada. And if we're paid 10 cents a kilowatt hour, so that would be maybe 8 euros per kilowatt hour, 8 euro cents per kilowatt hour, we would be able to pay off the wind turbine in about 11 years. And after 11 years, in the year 12, the farmer, the vineyard, or your community would earn as much as $350,000 per year, let's say 275,000 euros per year. And that's why farmers in Germany do this, that's why farmers in Denmark do this, and that's why people in Catalonia should be doing this too. Next. So Minnesota is the jurisdiction, the state in the United States that has had the most success installing community-owned wind power. And there's about 1,000 megawatts installed of wind energy in Minnesota, and about 1/3 of that, 300 megawatts, has been installed by farmers and small groups of people, just like what we want to do elsewhere across North America. Next. Now, another way that we can develop wind energy, of course, is let a big company, a giant corporation, whether it's Électricité de France, Scottish Power, Energia de Portugal, develop the wind farm. And another way to profit by it is for the landowner, the farmer, to charge a rent, a royalty for the use of their land. I don't know what you're paid in Catalonia. I don't know what a landowner is paid in Spain. I know what a landowner is paid in Germany, and I can tell you it's 2 or 3 times higher than what they're paid in the United States or in Canada. And when I put this slide up on the screen, farmers in the audience get very uncomfortable because some have already signed contracts for 1% or 2%. and they see what the Germans are getting, and they say, I should have known more. I would have signed a higher contract. And this is why it's better to give the people opportunity to develop wind energy themselves than to be dependent on a company that doesn't pay them enough. Next. And there's a number of ways that you can do this to protect the landowners, a number of ways for landowners to protect themselves. For example, in Germany, if you're going to develop a wind project in an area, you might get all the farmers in one room, and you set them down and you say, we would like to build a wind farm here. We would like all of you to participate. And the farmer will say, but the other farmer has wind. I don't have wind, so I won't get any money, so I don't want the wind farm. But what the Germans say is, all of you will get money. Some will get a little bit more, some will get a little bit less, but all of you will get money, so all the farmers are more likely to be accept the project. Next. And so we have brought this idea to North America, and it's being used in Canada on the small province of Prince Edward Island, where the farmer who has the wind turbine on their property gets 70% of the royalties, and those within a couple hundred meters get 20%, and those within 300 meters get 10%. But everybody gets something. Next. So community wind in North America has a number of opportunities, and we have a number of examples. Minnesota, community-based energy development. We have some wind turbines in a small city near Boston called Hull, Massachusetts. You've seen the example of Wind Share in Toronto, Canada. There's a big project in Nebraska of 80 megawatts. 33% of that will be owned by people in Nebraska. And there's a huge project in British Columbia, way up north, almost up towards Alaska, where it's a 120 megawatt project, and the community may own as much as 20%. Next. This is an example of Hull, Massachusetts, and because this wind turbine is owned by the city of Hull, Massachusetts, they have 95% of the people who live in the city, in the village, approve of this wind turbine and the others that are nearby, and now they plan to put 4 wind turbines offshore. And this is something maybe you want to consider about for Barcelona or Tarragona. Next. Another example is, I think there's about 300 megawatts of community wind installed in the United States. That's nearly all in Minnesota. And we have another 300 megawatts currently under development now. And as you heard, community wind democratizes energy because it enables everyone to participate. Everyone has a choice in whether they buy and own and profit from wind energy. It democratizes energy. And I know that this is, Spain is a relatively young democracy, and this is something that Spain should consider as a way of strengthening its democracy in your country. Next. So one example is the community-based energy development in Minnesota. They have about 900 applications to develop this kind of community ownership model. And there's no capacity limit. The governor has said, we would like to see 800 megawatts, and they only have 300 now, by 2010. And 2010 is just next year, so the people in Minnesota will have to get very busy. Well, if they don't, then maybe they should get a new governor. Next. And here's some more on community-based energy development. It is intended for people to own it locally. Unfortunately, as Americans, this program was designed so that it required many lawyers. I think for every person who wants to develop wind energy in the United States, we need at least 2 or 3 lawyers. And this program is one of those kinds of programs because it requires using our tax system to most advantage, or abusing our tax system. That might be another word. And it requires very high wind speeds, so those farmers who live in areas of Minnesota who don't have very strong winds cannot use this. Next. Another example is a Wind Share in Toronto. It's the first urban wind turbine in North America. It's the first cooperatively owned urban wind turbine in North America. It has 450 members. It's a very prominent location in the city of Toronto. If you fly to the city of Toronto and you go into the city of Toronto, pay close attention because you'll drive right by the wind turbine and make sure the turbine is turning. It's highly visible, it's highly popular, and if the wind turbine is not turning, people telephone the office and say, your windmill is not turning. And we say, but there's no wind. And they say, I don't care. Your windmill's not turning. Make it turn. Next. And this is the location. I mean, it's right in the city center. It's right near the water. It is on a major highway. It's at a major park, an exhibition park. It has now become the symbol of Toronto, along with their tall tower, the Canadian National Tower, CN Tower. And maybe this is something for Barcelona to consider. You have a beautiful solar installation by the water. Maybe you should have some wind turbines as well that you can call your own. Next. Next. As I say, it's very popular. There are people in the summer who visit the wind turbine and read these placards, and I'd just like to tell you those are real people. I did not put them in with Photoshop. They are real. Next. So these advanced renewable tariffs I talk about, you as a Spaniard should be familiar with these because you are using them. You're paying for the generation of electricity, and you pay a different price for each different technology. And it uses this principle of price differentiation, a different price for each technology, because each technology costs something different. And so we have to pay a different price. So wherever wind energy is being most successfully used, this is the policy that we use as in Spain. Next. Next. Okay. Now what I want to encourage you in Catalonia, and I want to encourage you in España, in Spain, is to consider changing your policy here in Spain. And if Spain will not change the policy, have your Catalonian government change the policy because they may have the power to do this themselves. And that change in your policy should be, not only do you pay a different price for solar, a different price for wind, is that you also begin to pay a different price depending on how strong the wind is where you put your wind turbines. This is what's done in Germany, this is what's done in France, and it's very successful. And if we did not have this policy in Germany, it'd be very difficult for community groups, for farmers to own wind turbines in Germany, because this enables you to get a high enough price where you live or where your community is located, maybe even Barcelona, because you're paid a higher price if your wind is less strong. And by doing this, this allows everyone to participate. And it avoids concentrating the wind turbines where people don't want them, like on the mountaintops, or in wind ghettos like we have in California. In California, we have let's say, 15,000 wind turbines, and they're concentrated in only 4 places. And when you look at them, when you drive to California and see them, you may say, no, we don't want that in Spain, because we see what the Californians have done in California. We're not sure we want that in Spain. Now, the Danes have actually said that, showed pictures of California where I'm from, and said, we will never do this in Denmark. So if you can have a policy that allows people to use wind turbines where they live, where they work, then maybe we can reduce this kind of effect of putting all the wind turbines in one place. Well, we want wind energy to be developed. We want companies to make a good profit, a healthy profit, but a fair profit. We don't want them to make too much money that makes the ratepayers, the consumers of Spain, pay more than is necessary. So this kind of policy not only allows farmers or communities to develop wind where they live, but allows you to regulate the profit of companies in the windiest locations. Next. So where does this stand, this kind of policy idea in North America? Well, this concept of feed-in tariffs, renewable energy tariff, is gaining momentum. Next. Just 4 years ago, it was absolutely impossible When I went to Canada in 2004, the first day I went to the first meeting with the first government bureaucrat, he looked at me and he said, "You should go back to California because it will never be done here. It can't be done." And he was right. We couldn't do it then, but he gave us good advice. He said, "Talk to the Minister of Energy, and if the Minister of Energy tells me to do this, I will do that." And so that was good advice, and we did talk to the Minister of Energy. We talked to the Premier, like the Governor. We talked to every politician. We talked to every farmer who would want to hear us. We talked to anybody who would listen to us. And within 3 years, we had the first law in Ontario. And now, 5 years later, we have another law that's being debated in Parliament. And if this bill is passed by Parliament, it will be the first German-style feed-in tariff or the first Spanish-style feed-in tariff in North America. So don't let anyone tell you it can't be done in Catalonia, that it can't be done in Spain. Next. So the mood in the United States in North America has changed since Ontario went first. Next. It's being called the most progressive renewable energy policy in North America in 2 decades. Now, I can tell you here, because I'm in Spain, I'm in Catalonia, I'm in Barcelona, I can tell you the truth. It's called the most progressive policy in North America in 2 decades because we haven't done anything in North America in 2 decades. So it's very easy for the Canadians to say this. Next. So why is it considered progressive? It's progressive because it includes all renewable technologies. Most policies in the United States and Canada are for wind, or there's a policy for solar, or there's a policy for hydro. This includes all renewables. It's open to everyone, farmers, homeowners, and businesses. And it uses differentiated tariffs and simplified contracts by Canadian standards. So instead of 100 pages, it's only 50 pages. For us, that's simplified. Next. It, as I said, includes wind, solar, hydro. Projects were limited to 10 megawatts, and maybe there should be some kind of limitation on project size in Spain. That could be a possibility for your community wind program. I don't recommend it. I think that this is the wrong number. It was a number chosen for political reasons. It was the wrong number. But the program was open to all, and it said, if you can install as many wind turbines as you want, it's okay. Next. And we were paid 11 cents a kilowatt hour, so that's about a little under 8 euro cents per kilowatt hour. Next. Now, we have, in developing the Ontario program, we adapted the German, Spanish, and French system to North America. And we particularly focused on the French policy, not the Spanish policy, because the Spanish policy does not include differentiated tariffs for wind energy. You get paid one price in Spain for wind energy, and that's it. We did not want that. We don't want that in Ontario. Now, I'm not sure we'll be successful in Ontario. We're still fighting for this. Unfortunately, some of our government leaders have come to Spain, and they've seen what the success you've had in Spain, and that's good, because now they're doing something. But they also understand that you only pay one price for wind energy. So unfortunately, we have to tell them that Spain is a great country. Spain has done wonderful things. Spain has created jobs for 40,000 people in wind energy, but don't follow the Spanish example on wind. So this is more work for us to do. Next. And the reason, as I've explained, the reason that we're doing this is increase ownership by farmers and people across the landscape. Next. So these French wind tariffs that we're trying to use in Ontario create fair profits at modest wind sites, but limit excessive profits at very high wind sites, at the windiest sites, like the sites on your mountaintops. Next. And I can say today, after meeting with the government in Ontario, and I flew here not from California, but from Toronto, where Nancy and I have been living for 2 months, and we will be living there for another couple months, is that Ontario gets it. It's the first jurisdiction in North America that actually understands what's at stake. And so they will be the first in North America to implement a full system of feed-in tariffs like in Germany, France, or Spain. Next. So the Ontario's Green Energy and Green Economy Act includes a lot of different provisions. And the policy is being debated today and will be debated for the next several weeks. But if the policy passes, it will be in effect sometime this early summer. Next. And the key reason that they're pushing this program, the key justification, is to create jobs in Ontario so that when the Americans are interested in installing more wind turbines and solar panels, they buy Canadian wind turbines and Canadian solar panels. Next. So we have proposed these kinds of tariffs like used in France and solar tariffs like you have used here. Next. As I said, we should have this program in place by mid-June to early July. Next. So what are the prices that have been proposed? Well, I don't know if you follow North America, but in North America we are cheap. We are cheap about a lot of things, and we just don't want to pay what some things are worth. And so one of the reasons that we haven't developed wind and solar energy to a great extent is that we haven't been willing to pay the price. But in Ontario, they're willing to pay as much as 80 cents a kilowatt hour to put solar on rooftops. So this is, that would be about 65 euro cents per kilowatt hour. So that's far more than you're paid here in Spain, but we have half the sunlight in Ontario. Next. And the wind tariffs, and for the first time in North America, we will have 3 different tariffs for wind energy. You only have one here. We'll have a tariff for wind turbines on land. We'll have a tariff for wind turbines in the Great Lakes, so offshore. And we'll have a tariff for community-owned wind, just like we've been talking about. Next. And so if we look at the different policies in Europe, and if we look at where community wind has been developed, the key item here is that where we have these differentiated wind tariffs differentiated by resource intensity, by the strength of the wind, that is where we find community ownership. Next. And fortunately, I can tell you that there's now an explosion of interest in this policy across both the United States and Canada. There are now groups active everywhere, and I think that the public is way out in front of the politicians, and I think the politicians are going to have to run very hard to stay in front. Next. Things have changed in the United States since George Bush was president. We now have another president, and not only is he another president, but he's a black president. And just 1 year ago, people said that that was impossible. It could never be done in America because we Americans weren't ready to have a black president. And I'm happy to tell you that we proved them wrong, that we as Americans could actually elect a black man as president. And I'd like to say to you here in Spain that you can accomplish great things too. Just imagine 10 years ago sitting in this auditorium and not smoking a cigarette. 20 years ago in the United States, we'd said absolutely impossible. We'd smoke everywhere, and many of you still do smoke everywhere. But you're not smoking here now, and none of you are even thinking about smoking, so you in Spain can do this too. Next. So their policies are being proposed all across North America, in New Brunswick, Michigan, Illinois, even the conservative state of Indiana. This is unimaginable. Minnesota, Maine, Florida. Remember, if you remember when George Bush was elected, well, he wasn't elected president. When George Bush was appointed president, what state was it that made him be appointed president? It was Florida, and even Florida is now considering this policy. And in California, we have a case of feed-in tariff fever. Next. And in the state of Michigan, which has lost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs with the auto industry, and of course, we may actually lose the companies themselves. Michigan legislators have proposed this kind of policy so that we can create new jobs in the industrial heartland of North America. Next. But until now, the policy in North America has been too piecemeal. We do the wind program and the solar program, and we never put them together. And we were never willing to pay for the electricity. We never were willing to pay the price that we need to make the electricity from wind and solar energy. The prices that you pay in Spain. So you have set an example for us that I think we in the United States are on the verge of following. Next. Is there still a philosophical, I would say ideological consequence in North America? We have many people who say this is communist. This is something they do in Europe, something they do in Spain, and my gosh, it's something they do in Germany. We would never do that in the United States. But of course, these are the same people that said we would never elect a black man president, too. And there's still people who think that nuclear power is cheap. We don't know how they calculate this, but they still say that nuclear power is cheap, so you don't need the wind and the solar panels because nuclear is so cheap and so clean. But there are very few of these people, but they have a lot of money. Next. So our strategy in North America is to create these policies to work alongside all the other policies we have in North America so that we can get renewable energy going, so that when your politicians challenge you here in Spain that this program is not a good program, you can say, yes, but the Americans have looked at what we've done and looked what the Germans have done and said, we want to do that too. Now, if the Americans do it, shouldn't we be doing it as well? So maybe we are using you as an example today, but tomorrow you may have to use us as an example to keep your programs in operation. Next. So our strategy is, in some cases, we may require domestic content. So maybe we would use Spanish wind turbines, but only if they're built in the United States. Fortunately for you, you already are building wind turbines in the United States. And then maybe someday we'll have German wind turbines in the United States too. And of course, we're encouraging community ownership, possibly between 20 limits of projects from 20 to 50 megawatts. Next. Because what we want to do, and this is an idea that's been driving the political development in Ontario, is the Premier of Ontario, so the Governor of Ontario, is saying we as a people need to move from a culture of consumption to a culture of conservation. Next. These feed-in tariffs turn farms, homes, and businesses into entrepreneurs. This is an idea that you have shown to us, and we are emulating you. Next. Because we as a people in North America need to move from being nations of consumers to nations of producers so that each homeowner is not just a consumer of electricity, but each home, each farm, each business produces its own electricity and excess electricity for the use of their neighbors. Next. Because what we've seen in North America from your lessons that you've shown us in Europe is that this is an idea whose time has come, and I don't think they're going to be able to put this genie back in the bottle in the United States and Canada. I think we're going to move forward. Next. And as the Lieutenant Governor of California has said, we look around the world. We've seen what you've accomplished in Spain and Germany and France and Denmark, and we know what works. And so it seems to me that we in California should use what works, and that's feed-in tariffs like you've used here in Europe. Next. Because now there's no time for half measures. There's no time to lose. We have to take action. Next. We need a lot more wind, not only in Spain, but across North America. Next. We need a lot more solar energy, not only in Spain, but all across North America. Next. This is a challenge that's worthy of all great nations, a challenge, of course, that's worthy of Spain, and you've risen to the challenge, but it's also a challenge to the United States and Canada, and I believe that we can rise to the challenge as well. Next. So these renewable tariff policies that you have pioneered here in Europe are a new policy option for us in North America, and for that I'd like to tell you muchas gracias. Thank you.